Nobody plans to raise a wild animal, and nobody plans to love one. But sometimes life doesn't consult your plans. It simply places something broken on your doorstep and waits to see what you do. It was a cold March morning when the father found it along the gravel shoulder of the road that ran behind the property. A bobcat kitten, no more than 4 weeks old, thin and motionless in the wet grass. No mother nearby, no movement in the tree line. Just a small wild thing lying in a world too large and too cold for it to survive alone. He almost kept driving. He told himself later that he almost kept driving. But he stopped, and he picked it up, and he brought it home inside his jacket. And that decision, unremarkable in the moment, would change everything about the years that followed. The early weeks were fragile. The kitten was dehydrated, underweight, and wanted nothing to do with human hands. It hissed, it hid, it refused food for the first 2 days until hunger overruled instinct. The family had no experience with wild animals. They were ordinary people in an ordinary house at the edge of a rural Tennessee county, the kind of people who kept a garden and owned one aging retriever and fixed things themselves when they could. They were not wildlife rehabilitators. They were not equipped. They simply refused to stop trying. Slowly, over weeks, something shifted. Not taming, that word doesn't fit what happened. Something quieter than taming. The kitten began to move through the house with the particular ease of an animal that has made a private decision. It chose its sleeping spots deliberately. It tolerated the dog with an expression of regal indifference. It watched the family with wide, unreadable eyes, eyes that always seemed to be calculating something just beyond what anyone in the room could see. By summer it had grown into a lean, amber-coated adolescent with tufted ears and heavy paws that moved without sound across the hardwood floors. The family had named him Cody. He was not a pet. They never pretended he was. But he was theirs, in the way that some things become yours not through ownership, but through shared survival. Then, in the early fall, the family brought home a newborn baby, and Cody did something no one expected. He never left her side. At first the family thought nothing of it. Newborns draw attention from everyone in a household. The dog circles the bassinet, the cat sniffs the blanket. Curiosity is natural and brief. They expected Cody to investigate and move on. Instead, he moved in. Within the first night home, he had positioned himself beneath the crib with the quiet deliberateness of an animal that had already made a decision the rest of the family hadn't caught up to yet. The mother checked on him twice before midnight. Both times he was awake, watching the crib, still. By the end of the first week, the pattern was impossible to ignore. Cody followed the stroller to the end of the driveway and waited there until it returned. He pressed himself against the nursery doorframe during feedings. When the baby slept, he slept nearby, but lightly, the way wild animals sleep, with one ear always turned toward the room. He was not playful around her. He was not curious. He was focused in a way that felt less like affection and more like assignment. The mother started filming because she didn't know how else to process it. The videos were ordinary in the way they were captured. A phone held at arm's length, natural light, no staging, but what they showed was difficult to explain. A full-grown bobcat lying motionless beneath an infant's crib at 2 in the morning. A wild animal walking in precise, unhurried step beside a stroller down a gravel path. A predator resting its chin on the edge of a bassinet while a newborn slept inches away, its eyes not soft but alert, scanning the room with an expression that looked uncomfortably like vigilance. She posted the first video without much thought. By morning it had been shared thousands of times. Not in admiration, in alarm. The comments came fast and they came hard. That animal is dangerous. One stress response and that baby is gone. These people have lost their minds. Wildlife organizations weighed in. Strangers tagged local authorities. Someone created a compilation of the clips under the title, "The Most Irresponsible Parents on the Internet." The family's faces, recognizable now, exposed, became the subject of a specific kind of public ridicule that arrives with absolute confidence and zero information. Neighbors who had never raised a concern knocked on the door to raise one now. The father answered calmly each time. He didn't have an explanation that would satisfy anyone. He only had what he observed every single day inside that house, an animal that would not leave his daughter's side, for reasons no one yet understood, including him. There is a specific kind of silence that belongs only to a house at night. Not the absence of sound, but the presence of stillness, the kind that makes a sudden noise feel like a rupture. The family had been asleep for 2 hours when it broke. The father heard the impact before he understood it. Weight landing on the mattress near his legs, then moving fast, up his torso, toward his chest. He grabbed for the lamp on instinct. In the sudden light, Cody was above him, eyes wide and luminous, breathing hard, his front paws pressing against the father's sternum with a force that was not aggression but something more desperate than aggression. Before the father could speak, the bobcat screamed. Inside a house, in the dark, that sound is not describable in ordinary language. It is old and sharp, and it reaches something primal in the human nervous system, something that existed long before walls and rooftops, something that still knows, instinctively, that a sound like that means move. The father moved. Cody was already off the bed and down the hallway before the mother was fully upright. He turned once at the nursery doorway, looked directly back at them, then disappeared inside. The parents followed without speaking. There are moments that don't allow for words. This was one of them. The baby was in the crib, still, quiet. Her color was wrong in the dim light of the monitor, a paleness that a parent recognizes before they can name it, before the brain has finished forming the thought. Her breathing was shallow and uneven, the kind of rhythm that arrives without warning and leaves no time for hesitation. The mother dialed emergency services. The father lifted the baby carefully and followed the instructions coming through the phone, calm words delivered into a situation that was the opposite of calm. And at the base of the crib, through all of it, Cody sat without moving, not pacing, not vocalizing, simply present in the way he had always been present, watchful, still, anchored to that child in a manner no one in that house had ever fully understood until right now. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. Later the father would say that those 11 minutes were the longest of his life. He would say it quietly, without drama, the way people describe things that have permanently rearranged them. He would also say that the whole time, every second of those 11 minutes, the bobcat never took its eyes off his daughter, not once. Deep analysis of Act 4 outline. Before writing, let me break down what's working, what needs careful handling, and how I'll execute it. The entire act is built on a single dramatic irony flip. What the world mocked becomes the thing that saves a life. This is textbook emotional payoff, and will hit the 50-65+ audience hard, because they deeply value being proven right about instinct and loyalty. Some stories don't announce themselves as extraordinary. They begin ordinary, even embarrassing, and only reveal their weight after the worst moment has already passed. For weeks the family had lived inside a kind of quiet ridicule. The comments were everywhere. Strangers on the internet, neighbors at the mailbox, even distant relatives who'd seen the videos shared by someone they knew. That thing is dangerous. They're treating a wild predator like a babysitter. One day that animal is going to snap. The family had heard every version of it. They'd smiled politely, or scrolled past, or tried to explain, and eventually stopped explaining at all, because the truth was, they didn't fully understand it themselves. They only knew what they saw every single day, the bobcat beside the baby, under the crib at night, along the stroller path in the mornings, pressed quietly against the nursery doorframe, as if standing watch. They told themselves it was attachment, a bond formed early and held deeply. Animals do that sometimes. They had read about it, convinced themselves that was enough of an answer. They were wrong about the answer, but they weren't wrong about the bond. It was an ordinary Tuesday night in late autumn when everything changed. The house had settled into its familiar nighttime quiet. The low hum of the heating system, the distant sound of wind against the back window, the soft darkness of a family at rest. Nothing unusual, nothing to prepare them for what came next. The bobcat's scream is not a sound that belongs in a human home. It is sharp and guttural and ancient, a sound made to cut through the dark, to travel, to demand response. And when it came suddenly, explosively, filling the hallway before either parent was fully awake. The father sat up first. He heard the impact before he understood it, weight landing on the bed, something pressing against his chest, claws not tearing but gripping, insistent, frantic. He grabbed for a lamp. In the light, the bobcat's eyes were wide, its breathing rapid, its entire body radiating a singular, urgent direction. It leapt from the bed before he could speak. It turned once at the doorway, screamed again, and disappeared down the hall. There are moments in a parent's life when the body moves before the mind catches up. This was one of them. They found the baby in the crib, still, quiet, face pale in the dim light of the monitor, not crying, not moving. breathing in the shallow, irregular rhythm that means something is wrong in a way that a parent feels before they can name it. The mother reached for her phone, the father reached for the baby, and through the instructions being delivered over the line, calm, measured, frightening, the bobcat sat at the base of the crib and did not move, not pacing, not vocalizing, simply present, watching the infant with the same focused stillness it had held for weeks, the same attention no one had thought to take seriously. The paramedics arrived in 11 minutes. The hospital came after. Doctors later described what had happened in careful clinical language, a sudden physiological event during sleep, the kind that leaves no warning signs visible to the human eye. They said the outcome could have been profoundly different. They said a matter of minutes had made the difference. They chose their words with precision, the way medical professionals do, because the weight of what didn't happen is sometimes too heavy to carry loosely. What they also said, quietly, carefully, almost reluctantly, was that certain animals possess sensory capabilities that exist entirely outside human perception, subtle chemical shifts in breathing, micro-changes in skin temperature, alterations in heartbeat rhythm too fine for any monitor in that home to detect. They did not use the word guardian, but they did not dismiss what the family described either. One physician, near the end of the conversation, paused and said, "We don't fully understand what that animal was tracking, but something was happening in that room long before you were called to it." The videos people had mocked looked different after that. Not because anything in them had changed, but because the people watching finally understood what they had been looking at. The refusal to leave the nursery, the alertness at the crib's edge, the behavior that had seemed so strange, so unnecessary. It hadn't been attachment displaying itself. It had been vigilance at work, quiet, constant, unwavering, an animal doing what no camera, no app, no device in that home was designed to do. Public opinion shifted the way it usually does, loudly, and without apology for the noise it made on the way out. The family didn't respond to any of it. They were too tired, and too grateful, and too changed. Wildlife authorities came on a Thursday morning in early December. The relocation had been planned carefully, a protected sanctuary, open land, the right habitat. The family understood. They had always understood that this was never fully their story to hold. They dressed the baby warmly and brought her outside one last time before the transport crate was loaded. The bobcat walked to them slowly. It lowered its head and pressed its nose, just once, quietly, against the edge of the baby's blanket. It held there for a moment, then it turned, walked to the open crate, and stepped inside without hesitation. No struggle, no sound, just an animal that had done what it came to do. Everyone laughed when they saw a wild bobcat beside a human baby, until they realized the animal wasn't seeking affection, it was standing guard.